game. Fox was on Liquid's side of the map, and Liquid pushes back with one swift punch. He steals it.
Never give up, never surrender.
And a pentakill! Counter Logic Gaming defeats Immortals.
Doublelift holding on.
You know, all those games that you could have won or lost during the season, they don't really matter anymore. All that really matters is this one best of 5 that you're going into, and you have to put everything into it.
This is your moment. You gotta own it. You gotta fight for your right to belong here. Now I'm awoken. Just this morning, inside of me open, and I never know unstoppable. Came too far to be barred by an obstacle. That's not an optional. It's my time to make impossible and the possible.
Winning playoffs to me is just to prove that we're the better team. This bracket's pretty stacked. C9, CLG, IMT. We're gonna have to beat the best teams. I don't care that we're the underdogs. I know that we can win. I don't want to be on the first roster that TSM has that doesn't make top 2.
이번에 이겨야지 저희가 베가스 가서 다시 한번 증명할 수 있는 기회니까 평소에도 강해야지. 지고 있을 때도 이길 수 있다는 생각하고.
I want to take first just because, you know, Immortals is 17-1. And how great would that be if they finish the season as 17-1, not first place?
I think it would be really easy to get first place. I mean, we're already practicing for MSI.
I want to go to the playoffs. I want to win the whole thing, and I want to go to MSI and actually make a convincing statement on the international stage.
Welcome to day 1 of the North American LCS Spring Playoffs and our first quarterfinal showdown. The regular spring season is done and 6 teams are left to battle for the title of North American champions. Fans both inside and outside are hyped up and ready to see their favorite teams battle it out. TSM are returning to playoffs yet again, but they have quite a challenge ahead of them in this first best of 5. They'll be going up against Cloud9, who you can see here walking to the stage to set up for today's series. Now, hello everyone, I'm James Dash Patterson. Thank you for tuning in for today's action. And spawning on the analyst desk, we have Mark Zimmerman, Aiden Zyrene Moon, and David Freak Turley. Gentlemen, we made it to the postseason. How does it feel?
I'm pretty excited.
Great. Feels pretty good. I'm glad that you changed your hair to your ELO.
I don't even know what color that is.
Yeah, it's platinum.
Platinum?
Great.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
we can call that platinum?
Silver?
Sure.
Silver?
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Well, hopefully we can get to diamond, but then I don't know how to chank my hair to that color.
Like see-through.
Just, yeah, literally.
Maybe when the
Freak's got shave it off. Yeah, Freak's got it down on lock. Well, let's set the stage with a quick look at how the teams are arranged in the bracket. In our first best of 5 quarterfinal, 3rd seed Cloud9 will take on their old rivals TSM. And heading to the bottom half of the bracket, Liquid are set to take on 5th seed Energy Esports. Now, there can only be one NALCS champion, but for the rest of the teams, there is still a fat stack of championship points just waiting to be divvied up. Now, these teams will bank those championship points, which will have a big impact on determining who represents the North American region at Worlds. As you can see there, 90, 70, 30, 10, or 50, 30, 10, and 10. None to the teams in 7th to 10th. Finally, just a quick reminder that playoffs will be played on patch 6.6. So we'll see how that affects. We already saw Gragas in the top lane there in Europe, so definitely a little bit of, as well as the Maokai, some changes in the meta. We'll see how that affects today.
And no Aurelion Sol.
And no Aurelion Sol.
Bummer.
That's a nice addendum to throw on there. Now, for the match at hand, Cloud9 versus TSM has a long history in the LCS, and in 4 of the past 6 finals, that's the matchup that we've seen to determine the championship title. Now, to add to that, TSM have never missed an appearance in the finals, so let's start with them. Thoughts on TSM?
Well, TSM, they haven't missed an appearance in the finals, but this might be the first time they do. This is the lowest that TSM have ever finished in a regular season, and historically, they always do well in playoffs, but they only have 1 returning member from the last roster in Bjergsen. So the veteran players on this squad for TSM are few, but in terms of veteran experience, they do have a lot of it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting situation where they bought in a whole bunch of talent, and in fact, Reginald talked all about this with, you know, the drive piece that came out last week, where, you know, he just bought the biggest and best players. Yellowstar, top 4 at Worlds, might lose in quarterfinals in NA, right? Like this is a matter of the entire roster actually coming together properly, figuring out what style is going to work for all of them. And as you mentioned, Aiden, with the fact that only one player is returning, it's actually a lot of what Reckless was saying as well with the new Fnatic is the first half of the split was figuring out how do we even play together? Like, what is the identity of this team? It's not just give Bjergsen the farm because you got double lift. And you've got a shot calling Yellowstar who's not a, all about Febiven sort of player. So coming together and the last 2 weeks of practice now for TSM are just very important for them.
Yeah, and I've actually heard some grumblings that they're actually looking really well, or looking really good in scrims, and I'm excited to see if that actually translates to the stage because TSM has a very try-hard mentality in scrims, so it could be the kind of thing where they're just like extra super try-hard and they're performing well in scrims, and taking it to the stage could be where they struggle.
Well, I also know that they're performing with well done. So working with the sports psychologist for 10 days and seeing if he can turn that team around, and if they're try-harding in scrims, then that's a really good sign that he's keeping their mentality up and saying you can't go easy at any point, even if it's a practice game.
All right, well, the behind-the-scenes grumblings say that things are looking up for TSM. We got to hop to the other side of the rift. Cloud9, they've consistently been in the discussion for one of our top teams this split and just narrowly missed grabbing that second seed and a playoff bye.
Yeah, and you talk about sort of preseason roster moves. I think C9 was one of the big winners here, right? It's okay, High stays on the roster as a shot caller, move down to support. Okay, that's fine. And you've got Rush coming into the jungle. Oh my God, yeah, the MVP, like the part of the reason Impulse were even good last time around. You think, all right, Rush versus Svenskeren. What a free matchup for C9. Oh, you've got these amazing players. Rush, one of them, absolutely. And the stats back it up, actually. Svenskeren has been part of First Blood twice in 18 games for TSM. Meanwhile, Rush is just, you can look at the numbers there. He's done so much for the team. High KP for him, just a lot of amazing things. And that's a matchup you expect to go really in C9's favor.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the driving force for the early game. What's interesting is TSM with Bjergsen and Doublelift have two of the most lane-dominant players at their positions. Both of them lead their positions in CS differential at 10. And yet it's Cloud9 actually who has the second highest gold lead at 15, and it's coming off the back of him.
Yeah, exactly. You're talking about how Bjergsen and Doublelift both have the highest CS differential in lane. Well, actually, Jensen leads all mid laners pre-15 minutes in kills.
Right.
And so does Sneaky. Bjergsen actually has the lowest kills pre-15 minutes, averaging 0.22 of all mid laners.
So basically that just points to these teams are finding gold advantages in very different ways.
Exactly. TSM, they're out farming their lane opponent, harassing them a little bit, but C9 are actually having team fights and grouping up and having a lot of explosive action in the early game, and they're the second bloodiest team, very slightly behind Immortals.
Yeah, and that's because of Rush, right? Like if you want to like sort of look at those stats and figure out why this is happening, it's like TSM are winning lanes without Svenskeren doing anything. Right? He's been a part of 2 First Bloods in 18 games. TSM are a playoff team, and they're still winning lanes. So that's super impressive to Bjergsen and Double. Those players are absolutely stellar, and those matchups in the 80 carry and melee positions are super important here. But again, the kill leads, right? Rush is tipping those back in C9's favor, right? They're getting these gold leads because of him.
It's going to be very interesting stylistic matchups. Now, we've broken down a few of the players to watch, but we want to know who you think will have the biggest impact today. So send your players to watch in this series to @LolEsports and use the hashtag NALCS so we can share a few later in the day. Now I want to cut to the chase, though, gentlemen. Predictions for who you think is going to move on to the semifinals, and maybe a brief explanation as to why.
I'm going to go with the upset. I think TSM might win. I think they'll win 3-2. It's really hard to
Come on, say it with conviction.
Yeah.
TSM's going to win 3-0.
Boom. All right.
3-2.
Locked it in.
Let's not get insane.
I just think stylistically it's very interesting. We kind of touched on it where like they have really good players, TSM. They're all performing individually very well, and it's about getting together as a team. And I think that's what makes them so scary coming to the playoffs, having a very, like we said, try-hard mentality. If they get on the same page, they are capable of upsetting here. And I think they might do it, and that's why I'm going with them.
Yeah, we know the ceiling for that team is incredibly high, and they've worked with Weldon for 10 days, and we've been blind for what they've been practicing for 2 weeks as well as a patch change. So it's very hard to call this one. I am going to give it to TSM as well.
Okay. Ooh.
I think that Cloud9, they are actually the lowest wards cleared and wards placed team. So I think that TSM, they're going to be a little bit safer. Cloud9 takes more risks, and if TSM are on top of their game, they'll be able to exploit that and come out with a victory here.
Right, but Freak, who needs wards if you're just killing everybody, right?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with C9 for this one. I think Cloud9 is better. And actually, it's funny. So you guys mentioned ward stats. Yes, High is the league failer in terms of wards placed per minute, wards killed per minute. And High defended this actually on stream once, saying, yeah, but if I place wards in the right spots, they're not getting cleared. I don't have to replace them. Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily the correct assessment. He was also a really bad warder when he was a jungler as well. And
Not as a mid laner, though.
Yeah, he was like, well, that's buy so individual awards. He just clicks the button, doesn't do anything, and he just assumes they're there in his inventory. But here's the thing. They've had bad ward stats all season, and yet they slaughtered TSM, by comparison in the second half of the split here. So C9 coming in better shape via all public perception here with arguably stronger players and better team synergy, and I think that's going to just be what it takes for the playoff.
It's those 2 weeks, though, that scare me because we haven't seen anything from these teams. Their prep, if you come into a playoff game and if you're having just one bad day or your team hasn't prepped and you get into game one and you go, uh-oh, they're playing something different, it completely throws everything off. So it's a little bit of a toss-up here. It could go either way, but yeah, we're kind of split here. What do you think, Dash?
Well, if you're honestly asking me what I think, I'm going to tie us up, and I'm going with Cloud9 on this one. I'm going to reserve my judgment because we're ready to get into game, and we'll discuss it as the games continue. But that unknown element that you talked about, that 2 weeks, to me is why these best-of-5s are going to be so interesting. Now, without further ado, let's kick it over to our casters to get the games underway. As we go, though, Double F says now that TSM has made playoffs, the real work is about to start.
It's kind of bittersweet because I'm happy that we made playoffs, but I'm not really happy the way we did it. So there's definitely a lot of room to grow. This is definitely going to be one of my toughest tests in playoffs because every other split I've had a pretty decent run, like up at the end. And in this case, I think we're pretty heavy underdogs.